This is Daniel Grove, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to make this epic spaceship. And in the process of doing so, you're going to learn a ton of awesome stuff, such as making procedural textures, spaceship holes, space scenes, asset scattering, hard surface modeling, and just general sci-fi art. So let's get started. I am using Blender 3.5. I know I have 4.0, but when I tried to make this texture in it, it got really glitchy. It was probably just my system. I don't know. I don't want to mess with the lagginess, so I'm just sticking to 3.5. There really won't be any differences between this and 4.0. First, I'm going to walk you through what you probably are most interested in is making this hull texture procedurally, and then we're going to make the ship, then we're going to make the scene, and kind of get more into the details of making it real. But for starters, let's just make a flat plane. So Shift A, make a plane, S10 enter. So we just scaled it up by 10, press a period on your numpad and it will zoom in and center your plane there. And I'm going to split my screen by putting my mouse right here, clicking and dragging down. And I really just want this to be on the kind of the bottom part of my screen because up here we're going to be doing a whole bunch of nodes. And I'll do my best to keep things orderly and clean because you're going to need it for later when the scene gets really big and complex. So let's make a new material. Let's call it sci-fi hull, and let's just put a number 1 in case you want to make a number 2, other versions of it for other parts of the ship. You can do that up here in the shader editor. If you don't have that, that is right here, shader editor, also Shift F3. I'm going to press in to get rid of my side panel, and I'm going to use my mouse wheel to zoom out and then click and pan over because we're going to be building a whole bunch of crazy stuff over here. In 4.0, the BSDF looks differently, but it works the same exact way as far as what we're doing today, which is just noodles and plugging stuff in. So don't worry about that right now, but let's get started. So Shift A, click on search, and let's type in VOR for Voronoi texture. This is basically all we're going to be using today. It's just a whole bunch of Voronois, maybe a little noise texture and Musgrave here and there, but this guy right here makes some really beautiful random square patterns, which are great for sci-fi hulls and panels and structures and whatnot. So we're going to make that. After that, we're going to make a ramp. So Shift A, color ramp. Right there. And let's set this to constant. Click on your white point, which is over here, and let's just put it right at 0.5 just for now. One more node, Shift A, type in mix, and we're going to do mix and set it to color. I think in 4.0 there is a mix color node, which is handy. Honestly, when they got rid of that in 3.5, I was super annoyed. So anyway, plug in your distance into color ramp, plug in your color output into A, because there's an A and a B, which we can crossfade or we can layer stuff. And we're going to be layering a whole bunch of Voronoi textures on top of each other to make a really complex and varied texture surface that never ends because it's procedural. There's no images being used, no tiling or anything like that, which is great. All right. So let's see what this looks like by going to our material view. Oh, we got to plug this in. Let's plug this into the color input of our BSDF, which is the big node right here. And we should see something popping up here any second. Oh, I have my fader at 1. Let's put our fader to 0, which means we'll see all of A, which is this Voronoi. All right, very important here. On our Voronoi texture, let's switch this to Chebyshev, which is pretty much the only mode we're going to be using. We might use a little bit of F2 later to make things more complex, but mostly it's F1 and gives us these random squares. And as you move our color ramp, you can see kind of where that threshold, this sort of like sets the threshold, because honestly, without this, if we click on our color ramp and press M for mute, you'll see these are just square pyramids, right? So they start at, white down here in the crevices and they go up to black, or maybe they're going down. I don't know. But they're building up to black. And it's just a gradient, but a square pyramid gradient. So when we apply this color ramp, press M again to unmute it, and we literally just make it constant black to white. There's no in between. We're just going from the tip of the pyramids down like a CAT scan down to the valleys and crevices between, which is there. But this allows us to make some really nice varied square patterns for panels and lines. You can play with your randomness as well to kind of turn it into a grid, which it doesn't look like anything right now, but as you increase your randomness, you kind of shift these things around. So I usually have this at 1.0. All right, now let's introduce another Voronoi texture. So select these with your selector. If you can't do that, just press B for box select, Shift D to duplicate, and let's put it down here. I like to move them over a little bit so I know like this is the top layer, this is the next layer, and we'll probably have a third one down here. But we got to plug this into B, okay? And let's put this, let's use screen mode. Screen mode will layer the white pixels of layer 2, which are these, on top of layer 1, which is this. It works like Photoshop, but kind of in reverse, because instead of layers stacking upwards like they do in Photoshop, we're going to be stacking downwards and to the right in Blender because of the node system. So let's play with this setting. We can change our settings. Let's put our scale at 10. There we go. So we see the dark ones that are staying still is the first layer. These guys, see the big squares. And then layer 2 is the smaller squares, adding some kind of breakup and detail to that. And then we could add a third layer. And we also have this control where we can kind of fade it out. So if you don't want like completely black and white, which is usually kind of harsh, you can have some real subtle layers like this, real gray. Let's make another layer. So click on our mix color right here, Shift D, and drop it on top of that noodle. And boom, it's already in the chain, which is good. Select these, Shift D, moving down here. Plug that into input B. Now we have a third layer, which is these. And let's make the detail maybe 15. Can pick a threshold we want. I usually don't go below 0.5 because then it just looks like a bunch of squares and that's weird. I like this where it's like lines. You could also invert it, where it's kind of the opposite, where we have like black lines and black crevices now. Cool. You can also change this to multiply. There's lots of room for creativity here. I really hope that you learn one thing from this video, which is how to be creative and try new things. Because honestly, that's the only way that I found this texture. And that's how I like to build, is I just experiment with stuff. And, you know, try A versus B. It's like, hey, I've always done it this way. Let's do it a different way and see what happens. So it looks pretty cool. Not bad. At the very top layer, we can make this like darker if we want, you know, more holes, less holes. Okay, let's stick with that for now. So all that we've done so far is really just create 3 procedural textures, layering them together and stuck them in the color input. But what about roughness? Roughness is where a lot of realism comes. And also we do want to turn up our metallic all the way to 1 because this is going to be a metal surface and you can't really see it very well in material view. But if we go to rendered view, there we go. We can see some light bouncing off. I am using cycles, by the way. Should have said that earlier. I'm sure my Eevee wizard friends could make this whole tutorial look incredible in Eevee, but that is just not me. I'm a cycles guy. I'm okay with long render times because I'm just doing stills. I don't really do animations. I don't do game design. So I'm a little spoiled with Eevee. But we get this nice glancing light. Now, here's a great trick to add some realism. We're going to plug all of this stuff into roughness. So, bloop, right there. Now, the black parts, the darker the texture, the more reflective it is. In fact, if it is completely black, which these big squares are, it's completely reflective, like a total mirror. But the gray parts are kind of blurry. You can see this white dot. That's actually our sunlight over here. That is our light being reflected off of the surface. And when it gets onto the gray areas, you see it's blurry. It's not as reflective. And over here, it's totally not reflective at all because those are very bright colors, which means less roughness, which means less light glancing, less light reflection. So let's play with these values, make a color ramp. Lots of ramps in this video. Just get used to it. Now we have black to white. This is how we control our contrast and our values for the roughness, which is the reflectivity, if you will. So click on our black point and let's make it not black. Let's put it at like value of maybe 0.3. Okay. And then our white, click on the color here, value maybe 0.5. Okay. So we're going from 0.3, which is here, to 0.5, which is the top end. And now we can see we have different levels of shininess, which is great. Got some variety. So it's not all the same. Another nice trick is let's make a bump map. So Shift A, click on bump, plug it into normal. Now we're going to grab all of these Voronoi signals, but we want to add a little bit of shape to them. So they're not completely black to white. We could do that, and I'll show you what it looks like. There we go. We get these kind of like fake ridges, right? Like these like fake detail lines, which is fine. And honestly, from far away, it looks okay. But we can make this better if we use non-constant color ramps. In other words, a little bit of a linear gradient. So I'm going to move these up here and I'm going to put them in a frame, which I think is Control J. Yes, it is. All right. So we can add a label here. If we go into the side panel, label, color, panels. All right, cool. So that's the color data and it is the panels. Now we're going to do a similar setup. We can now move this around in one little container for the bump. So let's make a new color ramp. Put it right here, and we're going to zoom into that. You can also press period. Let's click on our black point and put it at 0.5 and our white at like 0.51. Maybe 0.55, very close. So now it is still, it's a linear gradient, right? From black to white, but it's really contrasty and tight, and that's good. So now let's make 3 of these, Shift D, And as plug in each of these noises, we can have multiple outputs of the same node, right? So we're just stealing these outputs and making a copy to all three of these. 1, 2, and 3. All right. We have a screen and then a multiply. So Shift A, mix, set it to color. This one was screen. Second one was multiply. And then just plug in, this is A, this is B. And then the output of this is the new A down here. That's how we layer things. And this is B. And now the final result goes in here. Awesome. Now we have shape. Now this is probably too much shape. So let's go to our first gradient, make a little bit more contrasty. So instead of .55, let's do .51. There we go. Let's go to layer number 2, maybe .52. The scale of the noise does, kind of affect this. So .52 there. There we go. Nice. So this has a lot more shape and dimension to it instead of just those hard cut lines. So that's great. Now we've got 3 things going. We've got color data with variety of, lightness and darkness. Number 2, cool thing about this is we've got roughness variation. So everything is not the same roughness. And number 3 is we have a bump map, which adds more specular highlights and kind of fake geometry. Now I want to make this white part not white because I'm just not feeling the whiteness of our color data up here. So let's make another color amp. And let's drop it right here. I want to include this into the frame. There we go. You just kind of have to drop it inside. And now instead of the brightest parts being white, I'm just going to turn it down to something grayish. Yeah, there we go. I want variety, but I don't want it like completely white and black. And maybe make our black a little bit brighter too. There we go. Okay. So let's grab these and Control J them. And is there a shortcut? Oh, there is F2. If you grab a frame and press F2, you can add a label. So this will be the bump ramps. Awesome. Now we can move this around and organize things. And now let's make some holes. I think one of the cool things about the ship render that I showed earlier is that it has a bunch of holes in it, which adds more detail, adds some realism, and of course damage. Because I was going for like an old derelict, like lost and broken spaceship that's just drifting through space, full of, AI ghosts and whatnot. So let's use the alpha channel on our BSDF to make some holes in our hull. Holes in our hull. That's a mouthful. Whoa. All right. So we're going to use more of these little guys, more of these Voronoi. All right. So let's scroll down here and we're going to make a new set of Voronoi, VOR. Let's set this to Chebyshev. Make our color ramp. There's so many color ramps in this tutorial. I'm sorry. Let's set this one to constant. Put it somewhere in the middle for now. We'll customize that in a little bit. Then we're going to have a second Voronoi down here with a really high scale. Let's start with 50. And this one I'm going to have around 2. So this is going to be large holes. And then on the edges of the large holes, which would just be chunks cut out, we'll have really small, like almost wireframey, greeble-y stuff just poking in from the edges of the hole. And it took me forever to figure this out. So you guys better appreciate this because I found a cool way to do that. But you got to follow these very, very specific instructions. Let's set the second one to F2. There we go. That'll give us some better detail. And we're going to make 2 more color ramps. So just Shift D and Shift D again. Let's set this middle one to ease and give a little bit of contrast, kind of like that. And the bottom one, constant right around there. The top one, we're actually going to invert and have something like that. Okay. Now we're going to plug this first Voronoi into the first color ramp, which it already is, and the second one. And then plug in the second Voronoi into the third color ramp right there. Awesome. Just going to rearrange these a little bit. Let's make 2 mixed colors. The one right here is going to be set to multiply. And then another one up here is going to be set to screen. I'm going to explain what this is doing in a second. Plug that into A. Plug this into B. Plug this middle one into B. We're going to do a little crisscross here just because that's how it works out. There we go. I'm going to Control-Shift-click this node, and that should give me the preview ability that is given by the built-in add-on called Node Wrangler. So I'm literally previewing the direct output without any shading or anything like that. It's going right in here. If I want to get back to normal mode, I have to Control-Shift-click this guy, and now we're back to normal, And this is, this isn't plugged in anywhere, but I do want to preview this for now so we can get these kind of set up. So what's going on here is this first color ramp is controlling the holes, the first initial holes that's going to be cutting into our alpha channel. So black is going to be a hole and white is going to be solid. So we're actually going to invert that. There we go. I want just a few holes like that. There we go. Let's put our scale up a little bit. When we make our spaceship, the scales are going to have to be tweaked. That's okay. There we go. So we got a few holes like that. Now this output is being duplicated to this guy. If we Control Shift click this, we're still getting those holes, but look, we have this gradient around the edges, which is the super secret sauce here. And this gradient controlling these edges right here, the fall off of these holes is being plugged into here. And it's going to be layered on top of this guy, which is the small details, right? The little tiny greebly broken pieces. There we go. Let's turn that factor all the way up for now. And then let's preview this final output combined. Okay, I had to tweak the settings a little bit. It's kind of embarrassing. It's a little complicated, but once it gets working, you get this really nice fall off effect where you basically have, remember, white is solid, black is a hole. So we have the larger holes, which is these guys, right? And then around the edges, we have this little detail piece that is fading off into nothingness, which is using this gradient right here. So we have the dark holes in the middle, and we can control that fall off really nicely. So we have this little like fine details around the edge, kind of like a Star Wars greeble. And that's going to look really nice when we use it on the alpha channel. Because it just makes things look so much more interesting. There we go. So I finally got everything balanced. You can just copy these settings right here with everything that I've got going on. If you need to pause it for a second, go ahead and do that. If you can't get that to work, just stick with that very first Voronoi where we can have some holes in the hole. So going back to our BSDF here, I have this output, which is kind of this whole thing going on plugged into the alpha channel. Looks kind of terrible. I think our view, there you go. Yeah, our view is just backwards. Okay, great. So we've got these really nice holes. So let's make a cube. Let's get some 3 dimensions here before we get to building our actual spaceship, which don't worry, this spaceship is actually super simple. It's literally just a bunch of cylinders. There we go. Let's get the light in the right. Okay, there we go. We got some holes coming through. Now we need more light. We only got one light and it's a harsh light. So let's make this a little bit softer by turning up the sun angle to like 20s or 30s. That looks already way more realistic. And then let's duplicate this sun and make another one on the other side. So if you press 7 on your numpad, you get an above view. We can see our sun at that angle. I just pressed R, by the way, to rotate. And let's make another one with Shift D, put it over here, and we do need to rotate it around. There we go. Now we have bi-directional lighting, or two sunlights. Now, because our object is so metallic and so reflective, it's kind of reflecting the blackness of space around it, which is why it looks so dark. But we can actually see things when we get the right angle where the light glances off of it. We can turn down our metallic, or we can increase our roughness to fix that problem, but I'm not going to do that right now. So we've got two suns. I'm going to make one of them a little bit colored, so just like a light blue color. Maybe turn the brightness up to 8, and grab our other light and turn that one up to 8 as well, the strength. There we go. So we got a little bit of color. See that blue? Cool. You can even add a third one if you want, like a bottom light. So maybe Shift D, put it down here, and then just rotate it upwards. There we go. So we got light from all kinds of directions. That'll help us see things and make things more realistic. So cool. We got a pretty nice looking hole here. Now let's add the next level of realism, which is procedural noise. So there's just irregularities, because honestly, this metal is just way too clean and perfect. All right, it's too perfect. So we're going to add some dirt and grime procedurally, of course, because I love procedural textures. So let's go back to our node editor. We've got all this mess, okay? We're going to add a few more messes to it, but it's going to be a very organized mess. Oh, we didn't organize this. This is our what? Our holes. F2, holes. There we go. All right, now let's Shift A and add a Musgrave texture. Shift A and add a color ramp. There we go. Now this dirt essentially is what it's going to look like. We can add to the color data, so we actually see it on the the black and white values on the surface, and we'll also be adding it to the roughness so that it affects how reflective certain areas are. All right, so let's zoom in here and let's do some detail tweaking here. Let's put our details all the way up and our dimension down to .2. Below 1 is when you get those grimy, crunchy details. So plug this into there. And then we're going to make another mix node. Switch it to color, very annoying. There we go. Now we're going to add the black parts of the dirt by using multiply. You can add the white parts if you use screen, but we want to add black bits, dark dirt. So we're in multiply mode, and we're going to plug this down in here into B, and let's just turn it all the way up. All right. I don't see anything yet. Let's see. Why don't I see any of this Musgrave dirt? We have to be at the right angle because it's so reflective. Let's turn a metallic down. Like, I don't know, 0.5, something I never do. But I'm just doing it to help some of the visibility. Now we also want to mix this dirt into the roughness, and we should be able to see this pretty good. So drag this input down to B. Yeah, whoa, maybe too much. So let's turn that down. So if we go to 0, there is no Musgrave noise in the roughness. If we turn it up a little bit, it's going to start adding it in slowly but surely to the roughness channel. We can already see some of that dirt down here, especially when the light is glancing off and you get this kind of in-between area. We can see how much it's affecting it. Let's turn our dimension down to 0.1, and we'll get an even further spread kind of dirtiness. We can play with these levels, of course. We can invert them for a different dirt look. Move them around for more contrast. I like to invert them sometimes with Musgrave because it just looks a little bit better. And there we go. So we have just my roughness amount is just 0.2. Let's do 0.2 with the Musgrave, and then with the colors, put it at 0.5. Okay. Another cool thing we can add in here for realism is some ambient occlusion. So ambient occlusion is kind of like the shadows in the crevices that contact each other. And we don't have any of that right now, except for right here where these two edges meet. Even though they're separate objects, they are intersecting each other and there's a crevice there. So we're going to add some ambient occlusion. You'll be able to see a nice shadow. So Shift D, this multiply color mode. See, it's on multiply right there. And then Shift A, let's type in AMB for ambient occlusion, plug it into B, turn that all the way up. And we need a color ramp, of course, to make it a little bit more pronounced and visible. Turn up our distance maybe to 2. So without it, with it. And I can't really see a whole lot right now, but when we start modeling more shapes, you'll be able to see it really good. Let me grab this top face in editing mode, which is Tab. Selected this top face because I'm in face select mode right here. Now I'm going to press I and then E. So I just inset it with I, and then I extruded it with E. Now we have a little bit more edge here. I'm trying to see why I can't see more ambient occlusion. I think it's just because this thing is so shiny. Let's add a brightness node. Here's a nice way to control the overall roughness of something is turn it up. The brightness of roughness, as it goes up, it becomes less shiny. See, it's kind of matte now. It's like a matte finish. There we go. I can see the shadow over here on the left side. Let's turn that shininess back up a little bit. So maybe down to 0.1. There you go. All right, now we got lots of holes, and you can control the look of those holes by going down to our hole group down here and just playing with, first of all, the size, the size of the major holes right here, and then the threshold, which is is it just totally eaten up by acid and nanobots, or are there just a few little large holes in there? That looks kind of cool. But now because we've adjusted that, we need to come down here and play with this guy, because this is sort of that secret sauce slider that will get the little minor details around the edges. So let's play with the white. Yeah, that didn't do anything. Let's play with the black. There it is. The black one kind of fades in and around the edges. Nice. See that? We get those little details. And then down here, thirdly, we have, the scale of the small ones. We could do 20, which is kind of large, or 100, which is really small. And of course, we have the threshold for those. So we can kind of grow them. You can almost have a growing, self-healing material. If you animated this, see how it kind of eats away? That's pretty cool. Whoop. And you can animate these parameters with keyframes. So there's a lot of cool stuff you can do there if you have a little bit of time and some creativity. I'm going to put these real close together right here. So it's fading off the edges of the large holes. That looks great. Another cool thing to do with stuff with holes in it is add a light in the middle. So Shift A, light, and do a point light. Give it an interesting color like orangey red, and put the brightness up super high, like 10,000. There we go. If we move it up a little bit, there we go. Now we have the inside light shining through, which is really cool and creepy. Something is alive in there or burning. Yeah, cool. Okay. let's add a few dots and circles to this texture because it's all squares and stuff. And we want to add some more shape. So let's zoom out here and see where we're going to put it. I mostly want it to be in the roughness and bump. So we've got color here, bump here, and the roughness is really just a copycat from the color data over here. So we're going to go in here and add some circles. Now the circles are made by basically a polka dot texture, which is also Voronoi. So let's shift A and add another Voronoi texture. Make sure to not drop it on top of other noodles because you will screw it all up. So just drop it somewhere new where there's nothing around there. Let's copy this color ramp, plug it in. Let's shift control click this and put this back to Euclidean, which gives us polka dots. Polka dots are great because this is how we make stars, bumps, like warts and all kinds of cool textures. Let's put our randomization down a little bit and make it really picky, but with a large scale, like 2. Okay, maybe not 2. Let's try like 5. There we go. So they're kind of large dots, but there's not a lot of them, and that's good. We don't want a whole lot of dots. We only want a few dots. There we go. You can also switch this to 4D, which gives you a new slider, which is the W. And you can literally just sift through this like a seed factory and just get totally random dot textures. I'm gonna move my randomization up more. So if you don't like one, just go to a different W and you'll get a totally different pattern. Open it up a little bit more. Okay, I'll stick with this one. And we're going to grab this and add it to the mix here. So we need to add another multiplying mix factor here. There we go. We're going to also copy this down to the roughness output, which is right there. That's our roughness guy. Remember, going over here to roughness. All right, so we've added some polka dots. And we need to add it in right here. This is a new layer we just added. We can even name it. Click on it, F2. Polka dots. There we go. And we don't have to have it on multiply. We could have it on screen so that we're adding the whiteness to the previous texture. So let's control shift click this guy and we can see all of our panels plus these new circles. Cool. If you want it to be smaller, which I kind of do, let's put our scale up higher to like 20. Well, that's a lot of polka dots. Maybe 10. Yeah, that's cool. Awesome. Now, the polka dots themselves, you can leave them as harsh circles, or you can add a little bit of shape to them by going to ease and deciding like what kind of fall off you want. Do you want this to be like a nice little, like very soft edge thing right there? It's up to you. And that can also be reflected in the bump map. Just copy the same ramp, put it there. Add another level. Let me drag this frame. It's getting crowded in here. We're doing another layer in the bump ramps. So there and there and there. Okay, that's our height of our bump, right? Now we just added the gradient for the polka dots. We need to grab our polka dot output of distance and plug it in. Swing. All right, now the bump. Let's preview the whole material as it should be. And there we go. Now this is our polka dot. We can name it dots. Look at that. We got these circles. Cool. I like that. Look at that. They're kind of being overlapped by things. That looks awesome. I love that. Now we do want our color data to match the bump because up here is our color data of our bump, which you can kind of see it right here. Let me get a good angle. There it is. The white part is the actual color data of our bump, which we originally set to be like there, but the bump itself is much larger. So we got to scroll down and kind of copycat that. We could make like indentions like that. Kind of cool, but they just look like craters. And let's drag this one down to be right around the edge. We get this nice little indentation. Oh yeah. Me likey. But it's all about the light. You got when you get the light glancing off it is when you can really see it. So that's up to you. You may not like the circles. Maybe they would be cooler to add and mix into that hole, situation we got going on so that some of the holes are circular. Totally up to you. But yeah, have fun with that. Oh, I didn't turn it up all the way. There we go. Yeah, they're a little big. I'm going to make them a little bit smaller. There we go. Cool. Okay, I think that's enough of this whole texture. We added some noise. There's all kinds of other ways you can add noise to break up the perfection of the surface. Now we added noise to break up the perfection of the surface, but I'm just not happy with it. It's not like very noticeable. So let's change this multiply mode of this mix node, which is controlling the musgrave up here. This is our little dirt creator. It's coming into this, now it's an overlay, and then it's going into roughness. Just trying to show you where I am in my map. All right. So it's really low. Let's turn this up. There we go. Now we're seeing a lot more of that musgrave. .4 looks pretty good. And up here, you could mix like musgrave and noise texture to get more of a variety. So it's not just like an even dirt across everything. But I'm not going to cover that in this video because it's already going really long. I hope this is just a one-parter. We'll see what happens. So let's get on with the fun part and start making our spaceship. So we can actually just go to our material tab, click on the little shield to basically preserve this texture. Because if we delete everything with the texture in it and we close and save this, I think it will actually delete that material because the material is not being used by anything actively. But with that shield turned on, the fake user activated, it will keep it. It'll stick around. Let's save this, by the way. Control save. Derelict shipped tutorial. All right. Now let's Shift A and add a cylinder. There we go. Go down to our settings here, and I'm going to add quite a bit of vertices. I'm going to do 100. And we don't need to be in live render view mode, so let's go to object mode, make things a little quicker and easier. In our drop down on the top right, I like to have cavity turned on and my ridge and valley turned up so I can see like the edges and stuff like that a little bit easier. Cool. With our cylinder selected, press W and choose Auto Shade Smooth. If you don't see that, press F3 and just type in Auto Shade Smooth. Turn that on and it'll smooth out the shading between the vertices or the faces that we saw just a second ago. So let's start making this ship. It's kind of a Babylon 5 shape of a ship. And it's really like low poly and so, well, not exactly low poly, but it's very lazy. The way that I made my render you saw earlier was super lazy. So let's scale this up by 8. And we want to avoid circular faces because we're going to have to unwrap this with UV unwrapping. Don't worry, it's super easy and automatic, but faces like this don't work well with the type of texture we just made. So we want to press I for inset, and then we can just delete those faces. There we go. I know it's like open in here. It's like an open chasm. Doesn't matter. Don't worry. Let's grab this outer edge loop by pressing Alt and then select. So that selects this outer edge loop of this piece. Shift D, click to confirm, and then S to scale. So now we have just the outer edges. Let's SZ to scale them like that. Go into edge select mode, Alt click again to now select the edge loop of edges instead of faces like we had earlier. And we can press F to fill, I to inset, E to extrude, and S to scale. So I'm really just using a combination of I, E, and S to do all kinds of different commands that I use for hard surface modeling. Okay, got kind of a screwdriver shape there. Let's make some more shapes down here. Press F to fill, I, E, click. You have to click in between each command so that so the Blender knows that you're done. But we have a face here that's kind of overlapping, right? Because we pressed E enter. So I'm going to scale that up, extrude that down, maybe do like a bulge here for like a gravity ring or something. We just want a lot of variety in the shape. I'm going to get out of edit mode by pressing tab and then Shift A and add a cube. I'm going to GX and just move it out here so I can see it. All right. Let's move it up, GZ. Grab this face. I'm in face mode right here. I'm going to press, let's see, numpad 1 gets me a flat side view. So E, move that out. E, and this is not exact at all. Just trying to copy, make it like a handle shape. There we go. Scale it down. I said I was lazy. There we go. Let's get tab in edit mode again. Let's grab this edge and Control B to bevel. We can even alt click these outer edges and Control B those to give some nice beveling there. Awesome. Now I'm going to copy this whole thing all the way around maybe 6 times. So I would do this in object mode so that if we edit this later, then our copies around this perimeter will reflect those changes. So in object mode, have it selected, have your 3D cursor right smack dab in the middle, which is Shift C. That'll reset your 3D cursor. And now change your pivot point to 3D cursor. Now we're going to press some keyboard commands here in a weird sequence, but it's going to save you time. So let's press Alt D to make a linked copy. R, Z, 60, enter. So we made a copy. We rotated on Z 60 degrees. Now here's the cool part. Press Shift R to repeat. And then again and again and again. Nice. Now we have all these 6 perfectly oriented around. And like I said, if we choose to further edit and add detail, watch this. They all copy it. And you can edit any of them. You can edit this one and they all copy it because they're all linked. They share the same mesh data. And that is super cool. Let's do a similar trick by adding a little cube. I'm going to move it down. Oops, why? Just want to see. Where are we? There. All right, I'm going to bevel this edge here. Oh, cool. I'm going to grab this face and extrude it downwards. Nice. And then bevel this edge. Great. Now I'm going to rotate this around and let's do 6 times as well. Make sure we got 3D cursor selected there and we're in object mode. We have it selected. Alt D, R, Z, 60, enter. And then Shift R for repeat, repeat, repeat. There we go. That is some quick and dirty hard surface modeling tricks right there to make things fast and efficient. Now in my original render, I had this like flanging part that kind of stuck out. So let's get back into edit mode. I'm going to grab this with Alt click, Shift D, S, Z. Oh, look at this. I'm scaling it on the Z axis, but based on what reference? Well, the 3D cursor. I want to change that. So change it to 3D or individual origins. And now it's on its own origin. Yay. That's what I wanted. All right, we're going to press E, enter, and just scale it out. So we turn that flat face into kind of a 3-dimensional ring. Awesome. E, enter, S. Okay, now we have all these outer edges, we have all these faces selected, which is great. If you don't, you can make sure you're in face select mode and then Alt click, and you'll have them all selected. Now let's go to individual origin, press I, and then I again. Look, individual inset now. Instead of the whole group inset, all the faces have their own inset. And we're going to make these stick out also individually. So go to extrude in your tools and do extrude along normals. You click and drag this little control handle and boom, you get this cool thing. Awesome. Now I want to make it like a cap around the edge. So we could just grab this again, Shift D, size it out. I don't want it to be that tall, SZ. E, click, S for scale. If you press S for scale and then type in Shift Z, it will scale it on X and Y, but not Z. Really handy. Because if I just do this, it kind of scales it like outwards from the middle, but I just want it to be flat. So S, Shift Z, and then maybe shrink it like that. That looks cool. Maybe it's a heat radiator, maybe it's a shielding dish, who knows. And I'm going to add one more cube thing here. In edit mode of the cube, I'm going to press Control R to make a loop cut, and then move my mouse wheel up 1 to make 2 loop cuts. All right. And I'm going to Alt select this ring. So it grabbed the middle pieces, and let's press that. I'm still on the extrude along normals right there. So that's cool. I'm going to grab these faces and E extrude them straight down again, and then move them in like that. Trying to copy this angle, if you noticed. It's almost, yeah, I don't know what angle that is, but good enough. Cool. Now, I probably can't make 6 of these because they'll be overlapping. So let's make 4 of them instead. My 3D cursor is still right in the center, 0, 0, 0. We'll do 3D cursor pivot, Alt D, R, Z, 90, Shift R, Shift R. Yeah, that's cool. Kind of like an engine section. Okay, so let's apply the texture to this. So select it, sci-fi hull, and also some of these separate cubes also need that texture applied. Let's go to material preview, make sure we got everything. Oh, I missed some of them. Oh, there we go. Nice, and it's all got the same stuff. Okay, great. So there it is. Let's go to rendered view. And I don't need this floor because I'm not doing an environment. So let's go to our overlays and turn off floor. Awesome. If we press 0, it'll go to our 3D camera. I'm going to rotate on its side. You know, I always make ships face to the left. So let's make it face to the right and downwards. It just, like I said, do something different. When you're in your camera view and you are controlling your camera, you can press G to move it, R to rotate it, RR to freely rotate it in other axes. And if you press G, Z, Z, you can actually move straight backwards. It's just really handy. It's basically like moving away from your object. But I'm actually going to zoom it in. Here's a great trick for sci-fi art. If you're doing space scenes, you generally want to not have a wide angle lens unless you're like an astronaut point of view. But if you're looking at a ship or a planet from far away, you're going to have a telescopic zoom lens like crazy. So at least do 100 millimeter, maybe even 200 millimeters. It gives a nice flat look, which is what you would have if you had a telescope on a spaceship. Okay, I'm just kind of positioning this, get like a nice photogenic thing. Honestly, I kind of wanted this to be like taller and like skinnier. So I just scale the whole thing on Z, and this dish thing is just a little too big. My original render was really chunky and I kind of like that look. And this is sort of throwing out the proportions. So I'm going to grab these pieces and press Control L. Ah, yes, it grabbed everything. Control L is select linked faces, I think is what it is. So now we can just shrink everything. Oh, individual origin, S to scale. Maybe make it like taller, right? Like a particle accelerator, maybe a gravity ring. Cool. Awesome. And I don't really like how my engine is sticking down like that. So we can just move that up inside, make like a hole. Oh, and our square things are disappearing. Let's go back to object mode. They're getting hidden. So we can scale them individually and then maybe move them down like that. That's a pretty cool engine. I like that. Camera view looks like this. Rendered view. Boom, looks like that. Now, lighting for spaceships. Well, you can be, photo accurate or you can be cool. The photo accurate way is saying, hey, there's probably one sun nearby, because if we're near a planet, and that sun is the only light source. There is no other light sources in space. The starfield behind you is barely anything to, I don't think that would register in a camera. So we have one sun light, and that's all we got to deal with. Let's make it a harsh light. So like angle of 1. And let's turn it up pretty bright, like 20. All right, cool. So this is kind of what things would look like in space, right? Depending on where the sun is. Not very cool. Not like what you see on Star Wars and even Star Trek and typical sci-fi art. You've got all kinds of cool lighting everywhere that makes things look photogenic and nice. But realistically, it's not going to look that pretty. The things are very hard to see in space. So we're going to cheat a little bit and make our sun a little bit softer, maybe 10 degrees, maybe 20. Okay, and then we're going to introduce back to the other lights here. So we've got a blue light, which we don't want to be the same angle as the sun. We want it to be a different angle of the sun like this. Now, I would do this if there was a blue planet down here, right? Because the blue planet might reflect some sunlight back up to the ship. Maybe I'm stretching a little bit there, but in my mind, that makes sense. Okay, but I like the blue highlight. And then we've got an orange one, I think. What color is this? Oh, it's just white. It's just like another sun. Let's do maybe an accent color of orange. There we go. That's cool. Now, the unwrapping of the ship. We need to unwrap this with UV unwrapping. So select our main ship piece, right? Also select one of your cubes and your other cubes, because we really only have these 3 shapes going on. Tab into edit mode, and let's split our view again. We still got our shader editor. Let's change this. Oh, we need to do a few quick nodes here. We need to set up the UV coordinates to control all of these noises. There's a kind of an easy way to do it with some noodle tricks here. So let's Shift A, type in coordinates, so texture coordinates. Then another one, which is called mapping. And the mapping gives us a lot of controls such as rotation and scale. So I plug in our UV data to vector, and then this thing is going to go to all these noises over here. But before we do that, let's make a reroute dot, which is kind of like a, an intersection where you can do this. I don't even have to explain what's happening. You should be able to get it. But we can move it around, and it just makes it easier to reach a lot of things at once. There we go. Any other noises? Oh yeah, we got 2 noises down here. And you could do another one like this. Watch this. This is how people do fancy node setups, which I don't have time for. You could move these. You can even like rotate them. Oops, it went inside the group. I don't want that. Ah, shoot. I don't know how to get it out of a group. Let's just delete it. Maybe that might be a bug. I don't know. So plug it in there, make another one over here, plug that in there. And now we can drag from this point to these guys, which is our holes group. And we also have one over here for our Musgrave on the top. And this will basically allow us to map stuff around the ship accurately. Cool. Any other noises we're missing? I think that's all of them. Great. All right. Now let's change this to the UV editor. And we're going to start unwrapping stuff the easy, lazy, and automatic way, just how I like to do everything. So in edit mode, we have those 3 objects selected. We went to tab for edit mode and then press A for all, U for unwrap, and let's do smart UV project. This is all the shapes we just made, everything. Now press A for all and Alt E. So Alt E is a keyboard shortcut for UV squares add-on. I believe it's added by default into Blender now because it's so helpful, but it basically allows you to wrap cylinders into a flat like that, into a rectangle. And that just makes sense for so many uses. So if that doesn't work for you, let me know in the comments and we'll figure that out. But for me, Alt E does I think it's called UV squares unwrap, and it looks pretty great. Let's see, let's make sure everything looks normal. We don't want any circles. So if we select all, oh, here's a little circle. Let's see what this is going to. Oh, that is the, that doesn't matter. That's hidden up inside the engine. Cool. So let's go to material view so we can see these shapes better. Make sure everything's unwrapping normally. Yeah, that looks pretty nice. The way I just did it basically unwraps everything proportionally. It should have. So everything kind of has the same scale. And now speaking of scale, if we go back to our shader editor, we can control the scale of everything because we have this mapping node. So if we select X and Y and just drag up and down, it scales everything. So we can make things really small or really big and busy like this, like a mega structure. And honestly, that's kind of cool. Let's go to rendered view. So scale of 1, scale of 20. Oh yeah, definitely needs to be higher. Maybe not 20, maybe 15. Yeah, 15 looks pretty cool. Let's increase the holes, make this more of a broken ship. So our whole group is down here, not there. There it is, holes. Wow, look at that. I love it. Oh, it's breaking to pieces. So cool. Let's go down here and change our scale of our small details to maybe like 25, 60. Yeah, that's nice. That kind of matches. Sweet. Now to further add some realism to this ship, we should probably add some geonode scattered greeble pieces around the edges. So let's do that right now. Now in preparation for that, I'm actually going to make a new collection and call it greebles. All right. And this is going to be just a holder for maybe 10 or so shapes that are going to be scattered all around the ship randomly using geometry nodes. So I have an asset that I sell on my Gumroad and Blender Market site, and it's called Star Wars Greebles. It's really cool. Well, it's actually Galaxy Greebles, so Lucasfilm can't sue me, but it's directly inspired by Star Wars. So I've got a whole bunch of random pieces and doodads here that are inspired by Galaxy's Edge and other set design photos that I found of Star Wars. And I'm going to put these in my scene. One easy way, let's go back to object mode, is I'm going to make a temporary plane right here. And I'm just going to drop stuff onto here. I'm not sure what the scale is going to be. Let's see. Okay, that's a good scale. So I'm just going to drop a bunch of these pieces. And the reason why I'm doing this is because when I drop them like this, they all land flat on this plane, which doesn't matter for geometry nodes, but for me, I'm able to see like the individual pieces. Okay, so they're all dropped here. I can delete my plane if I want to, select all these, M for move, and let's put it in the Greebles collection. There we go. So over here in my collection, over here in my outliner, I've got my whole scene, spaceship, all those pieces, and lights and camera, and then Greebles. Now let's talk about scattering. Geometry nodes intimidates me. I am not a geometry node wizard at all. I can only do one thing with it. I can scatter stuff. So let's get that done. So I just clicked on my main ship piece. I went over to my geometry nodes editor and I clicked new, which what it does is it creates a modifier, which is the geometry node setup. And yeah, here we're looking at it, but I can't find any of the nodes that it creates by default. So just press A for select all, and then period on your num key or your numpad to center and view those nodes. Period is just such a helpful button. I love it. Alrighty, so over here, we're going to drag in our Greebles collection, make some room here. Okay, Shift A and type in distribute. points on faces. Now this might change in future versions because it already has changed with like 2.9. They changed how scattering works. And that was of course right after I made my first video of scattering. So for now, we're going to scatter points or distribute points onto the face, which is the ship. Now we're going to distribute in instances along the points. Okay, so points are just like 3D points in 3D space. So let's see. Instances on points, there it is. Instances is that. Now, before you plug this in and fry your computer, we're going to turn on a few things here. First, we're going to put our density down to 0. Then we're going to turn on separate children and reset children. And then pick instance. So we don't want the whole instance to we don't want the whole group of all these greebles to be put along, every point. We want one at a time. All right. So let's connect. So let's connect instances into instance. And nothing happened. That's good, because I think it's because our density is down to 0. There it is. As we turn our density up, we are basically building the ship out of greebles. Now hold shift when you do this and be very careful, because if you go too high, you will lock up your computer because it's thinking of 10 million polygons. So that's kind of cool, but we still want the ship to be underneath it. So we're going to do Shift A and type in join mesh or join geometry. And this is the original geometry of the ship. So the original geometry of the ship is going to come here, and then we're going to merge this with the greeble scatters and plug it into here. So we have the ship plus the greebles. Now the angle of the greebles is a problem because we want them to point outwards from whatever face they're stuck onto. So let's tackle that. Basically, the easiest, laziest way to do that is grab your rotation output of the points and then put it to the rotation of the instances on those points. And so now they are basically shooting outwards from any face that they're stuck onto, which is great. That's what we want. Awesome. Now you may want to make some of your own of these instead of my greebles. Go buy them because they're awesome. But you might want to make some broken antennae and panels and wireframe stuff, metal structures and skeletons that would be scattered around your ship, and that would be really great for what we're doing for a derelict ship. So I'm going to turn this down a little bit. There we go. That's not too much. And also for your scale, we can do a random number to control the scale, but we'll have a minimum and a maximum, which is really cool. So our minimum scale could be 0.5 and our maximum scale could be 1. If we plug that into scale, there we go. So we can control the small size and the maximum size. Whoa. Hey, that's fun. So I'm going to go down below 1, maybe 0.9 and as small as 0.2. Lots of variety. And I can actually turn my density up a little bit. There you go. Cool. All right. So where's our camera view? Oh, we were already in the camera view. Let's go to rendered view. Looks a little too busy with my little Star Wars greebles everywhere. So let's half this. We can actually type in a math equation divided by 2. There we go. 0.075. Okay. I want it even lower than that. And I want the pieces to be much smaller. So minimum 0.1, maximum 0.2. Oh, maybe 0.4. Okay, 0.2 to 0.5. There we go. I can see things that are there, but I can't see what they are. And also, speaking of that, they each have their own material, which is a little bit brighter than my ship. So let's fix that. My Star Wars greeble pack comes with a really great grungy Star Wars texture, but it is kind of bright. So I'm going to go to my shader editor. And here's the node group I made for it. Let's just turn the whiteness down. Yeah, cool. And we can make it less shiny by turning up that roughness and maybe turning up the dirt to make it a little bit darker and dirtier. Awesome. Okay. So yeah, I can already tell they blend in a lot better. We zoom in, we can see a few of them sticking out. There you go. Make more of a medium gray. Nice. Now there is still that interior light, which honestly doesn't really make sense unless you want this to be on fire and burning and, things exploding. But that's not really what I envisioned happening here. So I'm gonna go to my point light here and just turn it off and hide it. Now in my original render, I had this really cool Saturn ring in the background because I found this free space HDR that we can use. But instead of doing that, I'm going to make sure you how to make a procedural star background. It's super easy and it's really just using what we already did. So switch your shader editor to world and here we are. Let's make a Voronoi texture. Keep it as Euclidean, which is dots, remember? Make a color ramp and move your black up a little bit and your white all the way over. Plug in your distance and boom. We should have a really terrible looking starry night sky, but our scale is all wrong. So let's turn our scale up to like 300. There we go. Got some stars. If the stars are too big and blobby, we just need to turn, make this like more closer to the white. 0.02, yeah, like that. And then we can layer these with other sized stars. So Shift A, mix, color mode, drop it right here, duplicate that, plug it into B. Put your mixing mode to screen so that the white pixels of the stars layer on top of the first layer. And let's make these like 500 scale. And maybe move this black point a little bit further to the back to the right so that we see more of them. And let's go to the material mode. It's easier to preview it like this, and then go to your options and turn on scene world and scene lights. There we go. So it's not rendering it. Well, it is rendering it, but it's not doing ray tracing and denoising and stuff, but we can still see the stars. When we can turn up our strength. Oh, we need to turn up our screen all the way to 1 and our strength maybe up to 2, just to make the stars a little bit stronger. Nice. All right, another cool trick that I did with my render was I added an atmosphere cube, which is totally not something you have in space, but I did imagine my original render being a derelict ship close to a gas giant, like dangerously close. Maybe that's why they had to abandon ship. And because of that, there's atmosphere. You know, there's some atmosphere floating around if you get too close to a gas giant. So what I just did was I made a cube and covered up my ship. All right, now we're going to go to materials of that cube, make a new one, call it Atmo. Switch your shader editor back to object. We're going to delete this principled because we're not doing a surface texture. We're doing a volume texture. So principled volume is what we want. And make sure, don't be like me that one time, make sure to plug it into volume. And our density is really important because if we go to rendered view, look, we have a solid dense cube of cloud. But what happens when you go down to 0.1? Oh, it's getting a little more transparent. 0.01, I see the ship. 0.001, we might be able to work with that. So now if we go back to our camera view, we have this nice hazy, cloudy thing going on. We can go even lower. So 0.0005 is half that. Cool. We can even give it a color, right? If we have like an atmosphere, nebula, something going on. Yeah, let's maybe add a little color to it. And let's put it around an orange gas giant or in an orange nebula. So we got some orange color grading going on and like haziness. This is definitely going to increase render time. There's no way around that, but it will also increase realism. Another thing we can do is go to your in render settings, scroll all the way down, go to color management and turn your contrast pretty high, like high contrast. I like that. I think it just adds a lot more darks and lights and makes things look a little bit nicer. Let's make sure that our main light is in the best place possible. And I'm going to make it a harsher light. So instead of 20 degrees, let's go back to 1. And let's rotate it around and play with our main key light. You know, where is the sun in our little solar system that we're in? I don't know, but that's something you need to ask yourself. Cool, there we go. This middle light, or our third light, is working as like an orange fill light. So if you want to show more detail, add a light that's opposite of your sun to kind of fill in those shadows. If you want more contrast, then don't use too many lights. Maybe stick to 1 or 2. And that's actually pretty cool right there. I like that. But I want to give my main light a little bit of an orange color too, just to kind of fit. A little bit more red, less saturation. Yeah, that's pretty cool. And that contrasts nicely with the blue edge light we got going on down here. Now, if we add a little bit like hint of a star ring or a gas giant, it'll be looking pretty sweet. So go to object mode. Let's click over here on the cube, and wherever you click and drop that 3D cursor is where your next object is going to spawn. So Shift A, mesh, do a circle, and let's give it quite a bit of vertices, so like 200. And it's really tiny. It's in there somewhere. If we press period, we can see it right here, this little guy. But it's an empty. It's not actually a mesh. There's nothing inside of it. So tab into edit mode and press F. There we go. Now we have a face. All right, so let's scale it up really big. And we're going to put it way in the background. So let's see, where's our camera? Our camera's right here. By the way, you can select your camera and press S to scale it up. And it doesn't actually scale your camera. It just makes it look bigger for your own purposes. And I use that as a photographer. I like to know where my camera is. Okay, let's go to rendered view. And let's actually hide our cube. Or better yet, let's just make it a wireframe cube so that it's still there. But we don't want it to be blocking stuff. So go to wire. There we go. All right, so our Saturn ring is going to be in the background. Give it an interesting angle. Okay. And then tab into edit mode and press I and delete that middle face. So now we have an actual ring. We're going to make rings go around it by going to our shader editor, make a material, call it rings. So let's try a gradient node, plug in our vector here and our color there. And then we're going to control that. We're going to customize that gradient rather with a color ramp. So let's see, we want this, we're going to add a bunch of little white points, which you can, by the way, hold control and click on a color marker and just basically copy it like that. You can control click a few different times. It'll make more clones. There we go. Okay, so this is obviously not the orientation we want. Let's try UV. No, not doing it. We should probably just unwrap it. So go to our UV editor, tab into edit mode, select all, and then Smart UV project. Nope, we want it to be a rectangle. So Alt E. Oh, I have to turn this switch off. Alt E, there we go. Now we have what we want. We want the rectangle. And now we can add any like shape that we want to these rings, which is awesome. You can enlarge a gradient or a color ramp for more detail. So there we go. Make some holes in the ring. Maybe study some of Saturn ring pictures first before doing this, because I don't really know what I'm doing. I feel like the contrast should be a little bit tighter. Yeah, that looks a little better. Cool. And let's actually put this in the alpha channel. And then the color itself could be like orangey, yellowy, something like that. Alpha channel, where are you? Ah, there we go. In render view, you can see the alpha channel. So camera view, we got some rings. I'm going to position it strategically to catch some light. There we go. That's cool. You can also maybe fade it off around the edges of the ring by adding a black color. Let's see, which one is the end? The outside. Oh, there it is. Look at that. So we can kind of like soften the edge a little bit. Nice. Just make sure it doesn't look like a planet, but it looks like rings. Cool. And I'm going to put a colored light behind the ship that is orange so that we get some kind of glare. Hopefully it'll work. Let's do a point light. I'm going to make it obnoxiously orange so we really know where it is. Make the power super high. Move it down. I just want to like right off camera. Add a few more zeros. Whoa, not that many zeros. 10,000. And I want it, yeah, I want it inside the fog cube, right? Oh, look at this. I want it inside the fog cube, but like below the ship. So this is our light. Let's make our radius a lot bigger. Oh, we're scattering it. Gosh darn it. Got to be careful when you make stuff. If it's in the wrong collection, yep, we're scattering the light. All right, camera view, rendered view. Let's maybe add another zero. Maybe another zero. There we go. It's a little better. I feel like these rings are just too soft. Like that just doesn't look like what we're used to seeing as Saturn rings. So let's try constant. Maybe too much contrast. Linear. It's a little better. I just need to add some more of these little spacers to make it like, put the dark ones closer to the white ones. Yeah, maybe the black gaps smaller. Cool. And I want like a tiny little streak somewhere in here. Super tiny. Yeah, nice. Cool. All right, let's render that and see what it looks like. All right, that took 1 minute and 51 seconds on my 2080 GPU at 300 samples. And I'm seeing some things I want to improve on. So first of all, the ship is just too dang shiny. You know, if it's been drifting through space, there's radiation and who knows what other solar storm stuff. So I'm going to make it less shiny. I feel like some of these holes are just too tiny. I want some bigger holes so that it's more like busted up. And let's see, what else? The haze, I wanted to be stronger. I thought the haze would be a lot stronger. So let's do those fixes real quick. First is the shininess. So that's going to be roughness, right? We want to up that brightness of our roughness, maybe to .22. I don't know. And then our holes, we want to be larger holes. I'm going to hide my atmosphere cube real quick so it renders a little bit faster. So we want bigger holes. We're going to go down to our hole group. There it is. So let's see. Open it up this way. Let's get a better view of what's going on. Okay, maybe change our scale down to something larger. It was 12-ish. Let's go to like 6. Okay, and then our minor details around the edges. Put that scale up a little bit. Let's play with that fall off. So see that darkening is basically going into the center of the hole, how much small detail there is. So if we do that, there's none. And then it starts to grow from the edges. So let's do like that. So there's some, but not too much. Okay, cool. Also, I'm seeing my Musgrave texture is just looking a little weak. I think the scale is off. Let's increase our scale here to like 3. Make some more black. Yeah, larger black parts. And I want to turn my bump down. The bump is a little bit obnoxious. Maybe .2, .3. It's still there, but not like in your face. Hey, look at me, there's a bump map here. Cool, and let's shift our holes around. If we do our first noise to 4D, we can use a double W factor to just get new random hole areas. Find one that we like. Whoa, no. There you go, I like that one. That one's pretty cool. And let's also increase the size of our greebles from maybe .3 to .7. Let's add that shine. So let's go to our compositor, turn on use nodes, press period on numpad. Glare is our, we want to add a glare filter right here, and let's change it to fog glow and put our threshold down to like .1, pretty low. If we go to our view, we can actually already see the glare because this is not a render thing, it's a post effects. So it is glaring already. Oh, and let's turn up the intensity of our atmosphere cube. Back to shader editor. Let's double this. So from .0005 .001, and I'm going to move the sun just a little bit to show a little bit more of the ship. Also, it looks like our UV unwrapping for our like bottom engine cubes could use a little bit of work. I'm gonna make it smaller. So UV editor, tab into edit mode, and yeah, just like double its size. All right, let's re-render that and see what it looks like. All right, you ready for the reveal? This is an old render, and there's the new one. Oh, I love it so much more. It definitely took about twice as long, a little over 3 minutes, and it was worth it. I like it. It's more matte, which is like a more worn metal. It's not shiny and chrome anymore. We have more atmosphere, so there's a little bit more character to the color grading and the feel of the photo. That glare filter helps a lot too. It's even glowing the rings over here. We have just some soft kind of soap opera filter. Although, look at this. We have a greeble being generated on a hole. So I can go into my geometry nodes and use a different seed, which will generate these pieces at other places. It'll randomize everything. So that's kind of a, when you're doing random scatters, you can't control where they scatter necessarily unless you use more complex methods. And I don't really like how these holes look on this engine piece. So I could possibly just make a second version of the material that has less holes and apply it to just those cubes at the end. Because I like how it looks up here. But not down there. And yeah, So that's pretty much it. I hope you guys learned some tricks. I know this is probably a frustrating tutorial for those who are newer to nodes and texturing and procedural stuff, but hopefully you made it through and learned some great tips and tricks and got some cool renders. If you did, email them to me because I love seeing y'all's renders. Thank you for watching this ridiculously long, ridiculously complex tutorial. Have a great week. Whew.